Hey, it's been such a long time since we've had Liz Peek on. Don't know why. She has to get up at 3 a.m. like me and go to Fox News a lot, so she wants to come home, and she's got a lot going on. But finally we hooked up. She had a column. Her two columns the last 2 days were fantastic. Yesterday's column, Liz Peek, Democrats attacking Trump coronavirus response hurts the economy. They shouldn't politicize the crisis. That was a great piece. And she was on Fox today at 4:30 a.m., and she's back on here with us after a quick nap. Hey, Liz, it's been so long. Great to have you.
Good morning. I'm glad to be joining you. What a time.
Your column starts out, it says, the coronavirus is a tragedy. So is the response from the opponents of President Trump. Would you elaborate on that for us, Liz Peek?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what this country has benefited from since President Trump was elected was a very virtuous circle of rising consumer sentiment, better spending, which leads, of course, to great job creation, which we've seen month after month, rising wages, and also increased wealth creation. So the problem, what we have right now, obviously, is a serious issue that is confronting our country, and we need leadership in order to get the country through this. And what we've seen from Democrats is incessant politicizing of everything Trump does and of this crisis. And the problem with that is it isn't just scoring political points in their effort to unseat the president. It's also driving down, obviously, consumer sentiment and keeping people so terrorized that nothing the White House can do is making any difference, that people are stuck in their homes, they're not shopping, they're not spending money, everybody's completely freaked out. And I get it, this is a serious health crisis, and we don't want everyone running around the streets acting like there's nothing going on, but neither is it something that is going to completely topple our economy. And I think the more you have Chuck Schumer out there talking about Trump's incompetence, by the way, just as he also objected to the travel ban on Chinese people coming into the country or people who had been in China in January or February, Schumer doesn't know what is supposed to go on at this point. No, neither does Nancy Pelosi or, God forbid, Joe Biden. We're doing the best we can. I mean, this is an unprecedented, one-of-a-kind event that's taking place in this country. Has the Trump administration responded perfectly? No. But have they responded quickly and I think fairly forcefully? Yes. So it is offensive to me that Democrats are trying to score points off this, which they certainly are.
Well, I was very critical of the Schumer-Pelosi response to the president's speech on Wednesday. I thought it was highly partisan. I called it disgusting. I mean, this is a crisis. People are sick. We do have to do something about it. I thought what the president laid out made sense. There's a package now that makes sense. Why do you have to get on TV and blast them? And then I was telling everybody, I was on a press conference call with Senator Mark Warner yesterday. He had some good ideas, like unemployment insurance, you should be able to get it in 7 days. The small business loan cash infusion for businesses that need liquidity, small businesses under 50, should be able to go to your local bank and get that within 5 working days, right? Things that made sense.
Yes.
Family Leave Act, I have no problem with that. Just sign it, whatever. It's like they can't help themselves, right? Then he has to get to, the president's speech was a disaster. The stock market obviously voted on it by having the biggest crash since Black Monday, 87. He didn't like his tone. He thought the speech was racist because he called it a foreign virus. It's like, what did that have to do with anything?
I mean, this is the most absurd controversy. I now have my backup, and for me, forever, this is the Wuhan virus. Forget it. I mean, that's what this is. This is where it came from. And by the way, the Chinese deserve to be tagged with this thing.
Absolutely.
Because for months they lied about it. They suppressed news accounts of its severity and widespread impact. And so, you know what? They should be penalized. The good news coming out of all this, John, and there is some good news, if there was any lingering doubt in anyone's mind anywhere in the world that the Chinese are not a criminal enterprise, now they have to really wake up and smell the roses. And for our big corporations who for 2 decades have looked the other way as China has robbed them blind. And by the way, that is not an exaggeration. I could give you dozens of examples of people, companies that went into China, tried to do business in the American sort of open way, and basically had everything stolen from them. This is not a place American corporations should rely on in their supply chains. And I think corporate shareholders now are going to begin to really push back on corporate managements and say, wait a minute, tell us where your products come from. How much is dependent on China? Because now we know this is not the first time one of these viruses has escaped, whether a market or a lab, and really pummeled the Chinese economy. It has happened before, but China's economy wasn't so big at the time, so it didn't matter. Now it really is a problem, and American companies are already beginning to move facilities to Vietnam, to Turkey, to Thailand. That has to accelerate, and I think it will.
Well, there's no question. I think you nailed it. You know, the globalists have lied to us and scammed us for 2 or 3 decades, basically telling us China's the future. That's where the cheap labor is. And, you know, if you just ship there, there's a never-ending supply of, dollar slave labor, and you'll be able to go to Walmart and buy a 6-pack of past Blue Ribbon beer and save 5 cents. I mean, they've been telling us that for years. Now we find out they're making, 87% of our drugs. I mean, it's insane.
So I know the president is working on some sort of executive order about moving pharmaceuticals out, basically creating American-made pharmaceuticals. That should have happened some time ago. People knew for a decade that more and more of our critical products were being made in China, but nobody ever did anything. And by the way, Joe Biden has, as he steps up to the plate here, I think there's going to be a lot of discussion about what the Obama-Biden administration did with China, how they basically, again, looked the other way as China took up more and more of our critical, it's not just drugs, as you know, it's also rare earths and rare minerals and things of that sort, which are important for our security. So when China threatens, as they did a week or two ago, to withhold medical supplies from the United States because we're critical of their handling of this disease, that really tells you all you need to know about working with this country.
Right. Somehow we're supposed to not tell the truth about the fact that the virus, number one, emanated from them. Number two, they lied about it. They suppressed information. And had they not lied about it, had they got this out there immediately, it wouldn't be the global epidemic it is, because they could have controlled it there. Instead, ships were coming in, cruise ships were coming in. Nobody knew it was a Chinese New Year. All that stuff was going on. They never said anything. Then you got Joe Biden running around blaming the president. Liz, here's Joe Biden yesterday making a speech trying to be presidential. It's like Weekend of Bernie's. Here's Joe Biden says banning travel will not stop the coronavirus and be counterproductive. I'm going to play the cut, but just even before I play it, how is not banning travel to an infected continent, how is that bad? I mean, what planet do these people live on, Biden?
All travel from Europe or any other part of the world may slow it, but as we've seen, it will not stop it. And travel restrictions based on favoritism and politics rather than risk will be counterproductive.
How is it counterproductive? What is he talking about?
Well, here's what he should be talking about, that we have 400 airplane flights a day coming in from Europe. That's roughly 140,000 people. In other words, about 1 million people a day just on airplane flights coming in from Europe. Angela Merkel in Germany has said 70% of Germans are going to get this virus. I have no idea where she came up with that number, but let's take it at face value. We know Italy has a real serious problem with this virus. So does France, so do all the other countries in Europe. Here's the real issue, John. The only thing that is scary, in a sense, about this virus is that it could overwhelm our medical facilities, our hospitals, and so forth. So do we really want tens of thousands of people coming into the New York City area, for example, where I live, every day, many of whom may have this disease that require quarantining and testing and so forth? No. Why add that burden onto our facilities? Why add that many sick people into our population? It's ridiculous. So look, all these things are a short-term hit to the economy. There's certainly a short-term inconvenience and a problem for a lot of people, but of course this makes sense. It was the right thing to do.
Where do we go from here based on what
I think, look, let's talk various things. In terms of people's health, I think this draconian spread of self-quarantining and social distancing across the country takes a huge bite of the economy, but the answer is it will slow this virus. We've seen that it worked in China, it worked in South Korea, and I think in other countries too. They're doing very much the same thing. That makes sense to me, and that suggests, in fact, I just was looking at some surveys of corporate people, medical workers, et cetera. Most people think the spread of this will have been severely diminished within 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. So that is positive. As far as the economy, I think we do need the government to step in, make sure that credit is available, particularly to small businesses, make sure we don't have a raft of small business failures. I know people in New York who are very panicked about losing their jobs because their employer may go out of work. That is a serious issue, and the government has to help on a short-term basis. The risk is that, as they say, a crisis can't be left to go to waste. The risk is that you get a lot of government programs slogged in here that last forever, like paid family leave. That's been something that's been on the agenda of a lot of people for a long time. Maybe it's a good idea, but this kind of policy change should not be implemented permanently without serious consideration and a well-thought-out plan to do it. My view is, honestly, someone recommended just sending $1,000 to every able-bodied American, and I really think that's better than getting a whole lot of programs in the works, which are complicated, not well thought out, and could end up being a mess. In terms of markets and investors, people will ultimately look through this valley. We've been here before. I mean, the only good thing about it being around for a while is you can look across the valley. In '87 and in 2007, there were serious financial underpinnings that were weak. That is not the case today. I heard from a senior banker last night, their company had just sent out a message to employees saying, our capital ratios are so much better than they've ever been. We are solidly, placed to get through this. That's very reassuring because you don't want a massive credit-related downward spiral, and I don't think we'll see that.
We're with Liz Peek. Liz Peek is a opinion writer for The Hill. She also has a column on Fox. Go to foxnews.com, and she's on Fox News all the time. Liz, your column on Wednesday said Americans need hard data to quell the coronavirus panic. And you start out, your first line was, Americans have gone nuts. The level of panic in our country is extraordinary. People hoarding toilet paper, hiding out in their homes, ditching travel plans, stockpiling tuna fish, keeping kids out of school, canceling hair appointments is nothing sacrosanct. I read that first line and I'm like, that's what I've been saying for 2 weeks. I agree with you 100%. Although I did tell my audience that I did go out. I didn't buy toilet paper. I didn't buy paper towels, but I did buy a ton of cat food for Sammy, just in case.
And someone should be eating in the household, right?
Just in case I don't want my cat to run out of food. That was my only concern, was my cat. So I took care of him. Now life is great, but I kind of agree with you. Like we've gone crazy.
Well, what's interesting is it almost. Look, I think, as I said earlier, some of this social distancing makes sense. If you go to the grocery store, make sure that you don't touch a lot of people. When you get home, wash your hands. All those things make sense. But I think it's more important to remind people, and I've been reminding young people I come in contact with all the time, if you're under 50 or even 60 years old, you're going to be just fine. Children, by the way, appear to be remarkably immune to this thing. Not one has died, even in China. Very few get seriously ill. Kids seem to have a better response than adults. But, honestly, John, I think one of the best things that's happened, which is sort of horrible to say, we have a celebrity, Tom Hanks and his wife. They're sick. How are they? They're fine. They have kind of cold-like symptoms. And I think it's really important. People will be watching Tom Hanks and his wife and sort of monitoring them because they're famous. now we have someone who actually has gotten this thing, and according to his kids at least, he's fine. I mean, does he feel fabulous? No, he's got a cold or a flu or whatever you want to call it. This is not a death sentence, and I think the more people recognize that, the more people will begin to calm down a little bit. The problem in the beginning was there was such bad information. All we knew, and we have the WHO, the World Health Organization, which appears to be an organization set up to sabotage confidence around the world. I mean, basically coming out in the midst of the worst market sell-off in all time and saying, yes, it's a global pandemic. I think most of us had arrived at that conclusion about 2 weeks earlier. But anyway, and also coming out and saying the death rate was 3 to 4%. No, it's not. That's not even close to being accurate. So I'm offended by the World Health Organization's impact on this narrative. But look, I think the answer is people are going to survive this thing. There are already 68,000 people who have survived it. We never see those people interviewed on TV. They should be, because, again, that would reassure Americans that they're not going to die. But I think what we need to do is just get the facts out there, tell people what the realistic probabilities are, how this thing works, and, hopefully people will calm down a little bit.
Why has the media fanned these flames, the media frenzy? Why?
Oh, we know why. I mean, look, Trump's greatest bid to be reelected is that he has brought on a great economy by dint of lower taxes, lower regulation, and this virtuous circle of rising consumer sentiment. From the moment he was elected, consumer optimism went through the roof. That is something. All the talk about, was it Obama's economy or Trump's economy? That is the one indisputable fact. Donald Trump ushered in a huge wave of optimism amongst American consumers and business owners, and that has fueled a good recovery and tons of hiring. The one thing that they can do, and they've been looking to do this for over 2 years, to unseat Donald Trump, is to basically work to undermine that optimism. Remember last summer we had all this talk of recession, more mentions of recession than 2007, because the liberal media decided that was how we were going to get rid of Donald Trump. Well, it didn't work. Impeachment didn't work. Now they're hoping coronavirus works. I hate to be that negative, but it's true.
Liz Big, you said it, and you're right. I mean, the mainstream legacy fake news media has fueled this. It's tough for us to say on the air in a public format, but in our hearts, we know the reason they're doing this is to undermine the economy, undermine consumer confidence, scare people in the hopes of ousting Trump. And they would be, people die, people this, people that, the economy tanks, people lose money in the stock market in their 401ks. They don't care. As long as they can get Trump out, they're good with it. And you're right. I mean, they have tried everything else. Now they're doing this. Here, I just got a couple of texts here. Good conversation here, Liz, by the way. I've missed you being on. I've got to be better in getting you on. Christine from Arizona texts in. She says, why are high school and college game canceled because people over 60 die? It makes no sense.
Well, let me address that, because we've talked on air to some doctors about it. The rationale for closing schools, she's totally right. It makes no sense, except that any place where there's lots of people, like schools, kids go home, whether it's from grade school even or college, and if they have been exposed via a teacher or a nurse in their health clinics or whatever, they can take it home to their grandparents. That is the rationale. I think that school closings really is just all about having lots of people in one place. It really doesn't have much to do with age. And by the way, I think a lot of educators are looking at the possibility of doing online teaching, particularly in colleges. So there is that opportunity for backup. But otherwise, that is completely correct. It doesn't make much sense. Here is something that really offended me, by the way.
Go ahead.
There was a story in the Post today, New York Post, about someone getting on a JetBlue flight and getting a text while he's on the flight that he has the virus, which means, of course, that he was tested before getting on that flight. What kind of irresponsible person gets on an airplane knowing that they may have this virus? That, to me, is completely astonishing.
That is myopic, to say the least, and very selfish. You got to get a flight, but you obviously went and got tested for a reason, because you were concerned about it. and then without getting the results of that test back, you just jump on a plane, having the ability to spread the virus to everybody else that's on that airplane, including the pilots and staff and everything else, stewardesses, neighbors, whatever.
Yeah,
That's
it's
just
terrible.
totally selfish. It's just one of those things where you want to shake the person and be like, what is wrong with you?
Exactly. It's so offensive. I can't believe it. Anyway, that was off the subject. I apologize.
Yes, but always good. And always good to have Liz Peek on. I agree with you 100%. It's the facts, the only thing here that we need. And like you said, nearly all the deaths in the U.S. have involved elderly people in their 80s and 90s, many of them in nursing homes. The mortality rate for people of ages 10 to 39 across the globe is 0.02, or about the same as the flu, as was reported in the Washington Post. It's the same as the flu. And again, for all of our listeners out there, you can have the flu and not have the coronavirus. The difference between the symptoms of the coronavirus and the flu are two things. Cough, fever, all that's the same. Here's the differentiator. Shortness of breath and chest pain. If you don't have shortness of breath and chest pain, you don't have the coronavirus, period. I mean, those are the facts, Liz.
Yep. No, and again, we need to educate people so that they're not freaking out. The good news probably is that all this social distancing is also going to damp down the flu season, which was ramping up to be a pretty bad one. I think we've already had 18,000 deaths in the country, and the CDC was estimating 30,000. So the good news is probably it won't spread. Here's the reason I bring up this airplane mess is that the difference. A study from Princeton shows that this virus, the coronavirus, people shed the disease. That is to say, they emit particles or whatever for this disease at about 100 times the rate you do for the common flu. In other words, it is wildly contagious, and that is why it has sped across the globe with such fury, because it is almost impossible to contain. The only way you can contain it is staying away from other people. So when I say people are overreacting by stockpiling and stuff, you can still go to the store. Just keep your distance from other people and wash your hands when you get home. Chances are you'll be safe. But again, if you're 50 years old and in good health, you're safe.
Well, I'm 62, and I'm in good health.
You're okay, too. You're okay.
We're the same age. That's why we get along so good. But you look so much younger than me.
Uh-huh,
Liz,
sure.
Thank you for being on the John Fredericks
My pleasure.
Radio. Now, it's been too long. We have to be better at reaching out, Liz. Thank you. Thank you for
having me. Take care.